an honor and a privilege to be back at Orland again. Thank you, Pastor Mike, for inviting us, for giving us the opportunity again to be with you. I'm grateful for your partnership over the years. Grateful for the way that you've supported world missions in so many ways throughout the years. I've entitled this message, Mission Possible. And the passage that I'm using is the passage that's familiar to you, the Great Commission, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Our mission statement with International Ministries is kind of a paraphrase of the Great Commission. Our mission statement says that our mission is to glorify God in all the earth by crossing cultural boundaries to make disciples of Jesus Christ. And so this morning, I'd like to share with you briefly how our experience in missions has related to these three aspects of the mission statement. The realities of actually going to, how we've crossed cultural boundaries, and how we've been involved in disciple making. Well, our mission statement to glorify God in all the earth, on the surface, going to all the earth seems reasonable enough. When we're speaking of all the earth, that can mean lots of really cool places. American tourists go all over the world to exciting and exotic places. The problem is that all the earth includes places like the Congo. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go to the Congo. But wait a minute now. Is missions even possible in a place like Congo? Have you heard what they're saying about Congo these days? Well, Human Rights Watch says that political violence and government repression are intensifying. Even since we left about 6 months ago, things are kind of unraveling, getting worse in the Congo. And the United Nations has its largest presence in the Congo of all the countries in the world. And here are a few more statistics about the Congo. According to the latest report by the International Displacement Monitoring Center, there were more people displaced in Congo than in any other country of the world. And usually we hear about Syrian refugees or Iraqi refugees or something like that. There's the prestigious Foreign Policy magazine's Fragile State Index that puts Congo in the critically failed category. Only 6 countries like Sudan and Syria have worse rankings. In fact, if you look at this table, Afghanistan and Iraq have better rankings in the Fragile State Index than the Congo has. The Human Development Index that measures health, education, and income ranked Congo near the bottom at 176 of 187 countries surveyed. And Congo's actually gone up because when we left to go to Congo in 2011, Congo was in very last place, shared the last place with Niger, the place where the servicemen were just killed. Well, if you still want to go to Congo, usually you go to the State Department website and you read what they're saying about the different countries that you want to visit. So the State Department website, they updated this month, October 2017, says The Department of State warns U.S. citizens to avoid unnecessary travel to the Democratic Republic of Congo because of ongoing instability and sporadic violence in many parts of the country. There's a very poor transportation infrastructure throughout the Congo, and poor security conditions in eastern Congo and Kasai make it difficult for the U.S. embassies to provide consular services anywhere outside of Kinshasa. All U.S. citizens should have evacuation plans that do not rely solely on U.S. government assistance. So if you should choose to go to Congo, know that you are on your own. The U.S. government, they're not going to be able to come and get you and pull you out. So is missions possible in a place like Congo? Well, historically, working in Congo, working in Africa, has always been challenging. These pastors are at the grave of a pioneer missionary. James Telford, who was the first Baptist missionary to lose his life in Congo, the year was 1878. Before he died, he said, "I offer my body as a stone to pave the way for entering Africa, and I offer my blood as mortar to cement the stones, that others may pass this way." And so historically, missions has always been a challenge. A challenge, yes, but impossible, no. In our experience, for Rita and me, we've followed the highway that so many before us have followed. Both Rita and our parents were missionaries, and like Pastor Mike said, Rita's grandparents were pioneer missionaries to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we followed that highway that the early missionaries have prepared for us. And the part of Africa that we've gone to is a place named Kikongo. Kikongo is a rural church center east of the capital, Kinshasa. So rural Africa is kind of the context that we have been called to serve in. And because the roads are so poor, such a poor transportation infrastructure, we rely on the services of Mission Aviation Fellowship. And if you come and visit us at Kikongo, the airplane lands right in front of our house. So that's our house that says Kikongo on it. We are the airport terminal. And so crossing geographical boundaries is one thing. You can always get there. In fact, it only takes a few hours nowadays with the wonders of technology to get into another country. Well, crossing geographical boundaries is easy. If you can't drive, if you can't fly, you can always take a dugout canoe from one place to another. But crossing geographical boundaries, that's easy compared to crossing cultural boundaries. Crossing geographical boundaries only takes a few hours. Crossing cultural boundaries, that takes a lifetime. You cross cultural boundaries by living with the people, by learning their language, being involved in their day-to-day activities. But crossing cultural boundaries also exposes you to the very real challenges of life, of survival, in some of the very difficult parts of the world. Well, where we live at Kikongo, it was established in the 1920s, intentionally as a church center, a place that would be different from the surrounding villages. And evangelism and church growth are at the heart of what Kikongo has been about. As a missions organization, International Ministries has always been involved in ministering to the whole person, so that education and agriculture and medical work, they go hand in hand with the work of the church. And over the years, Kikongo has become a place of change, a place of new beginnings, a place of growth, a place of dignity for all people, whether they're male or female, or whatever tribe they're in, or whatever language they speak. And because Rita and I have been there for so long as long-term missionaries and know the language, we can work within the cultural context. Both Reed and I have the privilege of being involved in proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ. And when you work in Africa, you have to be able to work in multiple languages. Well, the way that I like to be involved in proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ is through audio-visual. One of the strategies, the main strategy I use, is audio-visual. Understand that we live in a place without TV, without theaters, even beyond the cell phone range. So when I go into an area with audio-visual equipment, this is really wild. This is really something. Kids, when I project on the sheet, on a big king-size sheet, kids will ask me, how did you make those people run around on that sheet? So I like to project the Campus Crusade Jesus film, but in addition to the Campus Crusade Jesus film, we also show health films, HIV/AIDS, or films about conservation, World Cup soccer, comedies, whatever is going to attract the crowds and give a lesson. And so, even though the roads are poor, we can travel with the audio-visual equipment by boat, by motorcycle, by bicycle, but it's really difficult sometimes to get the audio-visual equipment out to the villages that you're going to. So, usually if we go by boat, we'll unload the equipment, the villagers come, because villages are not right next to the river, but villages are up the hill a ways away from the mosquitoes. So you ask the villagers to come and take the equipment up to where they live. But the problem happens the next morning, you see. After they've had their film, they don't want to take the equipment back to the boat. They want the equipment to stay in their village so that you can project again. And so it's always been a problem how you get the equipment, fragile equipment, to the villages, and then how you get it out. And so that's why, as I probably shared last time I was here, our challenge is how to get the audiovisual equipment in. And so 10 years ago, I researched this simple flying machine, something that could accommodate fragile equipment and would be capable of landing and taking off in small places. And so I met Steve Saint, author of The End of the Spear, the one who wrote the book and was in the movie The End of the Spear, who runs a company that specializes in technology appropriate for developing countries. And so he's the one who directed me towards this machine called powered parachute. So it's a cart equipped with a 65 horsepower engine and a parachute that you lay back and back, and then as you go forward at 26 miles per hour, the parachute becomes the wing. And so I can fly over the swamps and the rivers and the valleys and with my audio-visual, my fragile equipment, and then set up this king-size sheet in the village. And then in the morning I load everything up, and the villagers help holding the parachute up so that it can come up just a little bit faster. And I can be back home in a few minutes rather than spending all day on the back of a bicycle or walking trying to get the audio-visual equipment back to our home. So that's the proclamation of the gospel. But as missionaries, we don't want to just be involved in evangelism, in making baby Christians. But our mission is to disciple the nations, to disciple those that we're working with. So after we've won converts, we want to raise up the maturity of the church. So the third aspect of our mission statement is to make disciples. Our challenge in Congo is how to promote the maturity of the church for a rural context. Because in Congo, when someone has a call to ministry, usually they go to the city. But once they've gone to the city, it's real difficult for them to return back and to work in a rural context. And so in the city, we have over 100 churches, all with multiple pastors. They just keep adding more and more pastors. But in the rural context, we have hundreds of churches without any pastors at all. So our objective is to train men and women in a rural context who will then stay rural. And long ago, the Baptist Church in Congo recognized the need to train for rural leadership. And in Kikongo, we've met the challenge of providing pastoral training since 1951. The man on the right is Rita's grandfather, who was the founder of the pastoral training school that we've been working at. Village families have been coming to Kikongo for over 60 years. They come as simple villagers, and then they're shaped by God's word. And so they return to their villages as changed people, equipped with the love of God to bring change and transformation to rural Africa. Well, for a number of years now, we've seen the number of our pastoral candidates diminish in numbers. And so the denomination asked us to move the pastoral training up to university level. And this transformation, it was really wholeheartedly embraced by the whole area. So now, in addition to the theology program, we have a program in agricultural science and teacher training. All programs that are very needed in a rural African context. And so now, instead of hovering around a dozen families, now we have 10 times that number, both in pastoral training and in lay leadership programs. Imagine, we're used to working with these mature lay leaders, forming them to be pastors, and now we have these young guys just out of high school, who want to be teachers or agriculturalists or pastors. So the challenges are way different for us. It wasn't something that Rita and I wanted to do. We didn't want to teach on the university level, but it's what Congo wanted. And being a missionary, it's buying into their agenda. It's not imposing a missionary agenda, but it's helping to stand with the Congolese, to be able to work with them so that they can reach their objectives. So the people that we're working with, they're the elite, the best educated that rural Africa has to offer. And so because of partnership with churches in America, we have one of the best libraries in the whole country. Why? Because the libraries in the capital city, they were all pillaged during the times of unrest, during the time of war. But by being isolated in the interior, our libraries weren't pillaged. And so we have probably one of the best libraries in the whole country. And one of Rita's tasks this last term was to organize the library and mark everything according to the Dewey Decimal System. Just something else about libraries and books. Students in primary school or secondary school, they would not have books, textbooks to learn from in Congo. They learn from the notes that a teacher writes on the board, from when the teacher studied. So having textbooks, having books is really something. And so these are university students, but they're just learning how to use books. You have to take them, show them the table of contents, and how to speed read, and how you find things, and how you index. It's really interesting. But it's not Harvard, but it's the best that rural Africa has to offer. And as I mentioned, we're way off grid, but with the help of American Baptist churches, we were able to get a satellite dish for internet. So we can't use telephone, but we can use internet, which is really amazing. And so our students now are learning how to use computers. When I was young, we went through typing class. You learn how to type, and then later we learned how to use computers. They're skipping the whole, well, I guess your kids are skipping the whole typing thing too. But these students that we're working with, they didn't even know what a computer was. And they come to university, and they're learning how to do research on the internet. So a new generation of Christians are being raised up, who we hope can bring the country out of ignorance, out of poverty, a new generation of leaders who have a different ethic, who are shaped by God's word. It's a huge challenge, but hopefully not impossible. We're working hard at it. We've only had 2 years of this university level. It's a 3-year program before they graduate. So we've got one more year before we graduate our first class. And so it's a real challenge. It's really hard for us, but it's not impossible. I've been the Old Testament professor when we had the pastoral training system, but now that we have theology, I have to teach Hebrew. Well, it's been 30 years since I was at seminary and took a 2-week intensive class in Hebrew, and now I have to teach 3 levels of Hebrew. So imagine, trying to work with Africans who are so good at languages and trying to teach them another language. So I had to stay, just a few hours ahead of my students each day. And get this, I don't have to teach Hebrew and English, I have to teach Hebrew and French to French speakers. So you have to really be multilingual and multitask to be able to work in the African cultural context. I think that as a result of more than a century of missions in the Congo, a very indigenous African-looking church has developed. A faith has been planted that resonates with the African culture. We haven't transplanted an American Baptist church to Congo and get them to work like get them to worship like Baptists worship here in America. No. The spiritual needs of the Africans are different than the spiritual needs of those of us here in America. And I think that we as a denomination, we've been good at contextualizing. In other words, making the gospel appropriate to the needs of the culture that we're working in. So is missions possible in a place like Congo? Well, I think clearly with the help, with the partnership of churches in America who have contributed to the World Mission Offering for years and years, we've got missions in so many parts of the world. And I think the answer is that yes, missions is possible because of the partnership of churches here in America. It's been done at great odds, but hopefully we can carry it on in the future also. Let's not forget that this very denomination has been the champions of missions worldwide for so many years. It was this denomination that was united and formed actually to support missions, because unity is what leads to strength. And yet, we face many challenges today as a denomination, as a church. As I think about the work of the American Baptist women throughout the years, from our grandparents' generation to my parents' generation to our generation, and think about how the American Baptist women have been the hard chargers, the unsung heroes of missions throughout the generations. But I look around and I say, who's going to replace the American Baptist women who are aging and not as strong as they used to be? And I'm a little bit concerned about that, because as I say, the ABW are the unsung heroes of missions, who have been promoting missions in our churches and rolling bandages for all those years. And those bandages, they get to us. And they've saved so many people. You've been partners with the hospitals, with the medical work for so long. And I sometimes wonder if we've lost the vision of the greatest generation of Americans who are passionate about missions, even during depressing times. I wonder how we engage a new generation of Americans in an increasingly secular and almost post-Christian America. We're away for 5 years at a time in Congo and coming back to America, and we see enormous changes in America, in American culture, and it's really frightening how things are changing here in America. And so the frightening place to be a Christian now is not the dark reaches of Africa, but right here in America. I thank God that God called me to Africa and not called me to the church in America like Pastor Mike Gleason. Mike Gleason is the one who has the greater challenge that I have with the changing American culture. And how do we as a church address the changing culture, the changing issues? You know, when you think about cross-cultural transformation, cross-cultural travel, how do we work in this culture, in the American culture? How do we cross generational boundaries and reach the youth of America who are being influenced by so much anti-Christian values in our universities, for example? We're compelled to ask, is evangelism and discipleship possible even in America? Well, Christianity, it's thrived at great odds in Africa, and so this gives me hope for the future of the church in America as well. God has done great things in our denomination throughout the generation. We have overcome conflicts. Missions, church growth, it's not impossible. It is possible. It can be done. It'll be hard, but certainly God is at work among us and has been at work among us for generations. Amen. Missions, it's still dependent upon strong, faithful churches here in America. It's great to see a full church here in Orland. It's encouraging to me to see a full church. And so missions, it's still in need of those who stand with those who go. You who stand with missionaries who work worldwide. It's you who provide the prayer support, the financial support, the technical support, and the encouragement that's so vital for the work of world missions. This is the time that we give to the World Mission Offering. And it's not just the Chapmans that your church supports, but you support home missions, and you support international missions all over the world. You know, long ago, the Lord began an amazing process through our churches here in America. And the faithfulness of our elders, it's produced much fruit. Let's pray to the Lord of the harvest that the same Spirit who moved our ancestors would also be at work among our churches worldwide in this present generation. With God, all things are possible. And with God, even missions is possible. Thank you, Orland, for your active role in making missions possible in the far corners of the world. And may God bless you as you continue to labor and work and evangelize and reach out to the dark corners of America as others are working in the dark corners of the world as well. God bless you, First Baptist Orland. Might God bless you, your ministry here in America. Thank you for your support.